Hey, what's up guys? Welcome to AnTalk, the weekly comic conversation. So, a graphic novel is a form of literature that may be quite underrated when it comes to the average person. A graphic novel is basically defined as a story told in the form of comic strips. What a graphic novel truly is can be a bit more complex, and even the specifics can differ depending on one's perspective. I called it a form of literature earlier that might be underrated to the average person. That's because people just see them as comic books, and comics are considered by most for kids. There's plenty of comic books out there for kids, but to people who do read comic books, this is considered a very unjust judgment. While both comic books and graphic novels deserve to be regarded as unique and just as credible and respected as any other art form, literature and storytelling with great authors, writers, and illustrators who create incredible pieces of work. Today, I'm talking about graphic novels, and I'm going to go over a list of some of my favorites from what I've read over the years. First, let me tell you what I think of graphic novels and how they differ from your average comic book. Both styles use the same format, and even many revolve around the same comic book characters you all know and love. And if you said a graphic novel was just a bigger, longer comic book, I wouldn't disagree with you, but comic books are stories that are told in a series, with new issues that come out usually on a monthly basis. Comic books are typically much shorter than graphic novels. You have to read all the books in that particular series to get the whole story. Just one book is only a segment of the larger arc. Graphic novels typically cover one main story, start to finish, even though there could possibly be other books with follow-up stories or stories leading up to, but usually the plot or story arc takes place in one novel, or at least in a limited series. Some of the great graphic novels that are out there deserve as much respect as any other great novel, period. But most of the time, graphic novels are not nearly as long as actual novels, but can just as well get a point across or express an idea. A big reason for that, I believe, is the art and illustration. It's in comic strip form, so you don't have to be as descriptive of the scene and setting through words because it's expressed through the visual art, allowing only dialogue, the thoughts of characters, and possibly descriptions of time, place, and situation to be the only actual writing in the final product. It takes really great artists and really great writers to come up with a great graphic novel, especially the more mature ones, with heavy subject matter from sex, violence, dark undertones and overtones, to diving deep into the psyches of well-known heroes and villains, as well as many other characters. Graphic novels by no means only revolve around superhero-type characters. There are plenty of different story arcs and characters that are not superhero-related. It's probably pretty obvious I'm partial to this type of storytelling. I'm already into this kind of stuff, like comic books, nerd culture, etc. I just think that graphic novels should be appreciated for what they are. I'm not saying they don't get any love either. These days, a lot of people are aware of the significance of a great graphic novel. In fact, in college, I had a roommate who took a literature class, and his professor actually assigned him Watchmen. That was one of the days I realized just how profound a graphic novel could be. There are really great authors who write these things, people like Alan Moore and Frank Miller. Watchmen is a book I'll actually get back into in a moment, but it was written by Alan Moore. Now, Alan Moore is an incredible author, period, graphic novel or not. The way he's able to get the psychology of the characters and lay undertones throughout his stories. Also, I love a lot of the art you will find in these books. There are some really great artists, and what they are able to express through imagery and the tones they are able to set in these fictional worlds and the stories is incredible. Now, before getting into my list, I just want to mention that this won't really be a countdown, and I won't be ranking these, because there's so many classics and great graphic novels from what I've heard that I still yet to read, and I really want to. It would be really hard for me to make an all-time list right now. Plus, some of the graphic novels on this list I haven't read in years, so I'm having trouble remembering everything about some of them. But I will briefly review what I have read, and I say briefly because of time purposes. There are a few on this list that I would like to go more in depth on in their own videos. Also, this is strictly graphic novels, no comic books. I will include standalone stories that may have been released in a limited series, but But in this case, no compressed series such as Marvel's Civil War or the Infinity Gauntlet or anything like that, or anything that is part of an ongoing comic book universe and also has ramifications in the storyline of individual character series and stuff like that. Possibly in the future I could do a video on that kind of stuff, but for now, let's get into it. Batman, Year 1. Published by DC Comics in 1986, during a time DC wanted to retcon and update some of their biggest names, but Batman's origin needed no changes, just to be dug deeper into and expanded upon. Written by Frank Miller, one of the all-time great writers when it comes to comics, with many classics and well-known graphic novels such as 300, Sin City, Daredevil, The Man Without Fear, and another Batman novel I'll get to on this list. But Batman Year 1, illustrated by David Mazzucchelli, together him and Frank Miller created a pretty good interpretation of a gritty, in my opinion, more realistic and grounded beginning to the Dark Knight's career. I thought the artwork was interesting. I thought it set a darker, realish tone in a simple yet detailed way. There are a couple images of Batman I really liked, especially one that looks pretty intimidating. For anyone looking to start reading comics or even just Batman, I highly recommend this book as a good place to start. Without spoiling too much, this book starts with Bruce Wayne having recently returned to Gotham after years abroad and training, and he's ready to fight his war on crime. And this is before he's even created the identity of Batman. Like I said earlier, it's a more realish, grounded, grittier depiction to me, and it's pretty unique and cool to see Batman as an amateur for a change. As you'll see, he doesn't have a real smooth start. This story also introduces characters like Selina Kyle and Jim Gordon. Jim Gordon, who gets his own storyline. We get a good look into who he is and his adjustment to being a new, good cop in such a corrupt city. So like I said, if you're looking to start reading comics, this is a pretty good place to start, because it takes you back into the beginning of the career of Batman, and everybody loves Batman, so why not start where he did? So that's a brief look into Batman Year 1. So let's get right into the next book on the list, Wolverine Old Man Logan. Old Man Logan is a futuristic, post-apocalyptic what-if story about Wolverine. I already dedicated a video to this one, so if you haven't seen it, you should definitely go check that out. And because of that, I'm not going to really go into this that much. But it was written by Mark Millar and illustrated by Steve McNiven. It's a pretty fun story if you ask me. It's kind of like a western that centers around Wolverine in the post-apocalyptic future ruled by supervillains. It's not the most complex or in-depth or psychological story out there by any means, but in my opinion, it's just a really fun ride. I love some of the artwork and imagery, super creative and super beautiful. So yeah, check out Old Man Logan and check out my video on Old Man Logan. So let's move on to the next graphic novel on the list, Watchmen. Like I said, this list is in no particular order, and if it was, Watchmen would be right near the top, believe me. But I'm talking about Watchmen, published by DC Comics in 1986, written by Alan Moore and illustrated by Dave Gibbons. This could be the greatest graphic novel of all time. Even Time magazine put it in its 100 best novels, period. And like I mentioned this before, I know this book to be taught and assigned in college courses. Moore is so great when it comes to getting inside the minds of characters, whether it be a well-known comic book character or a totally unique and original one like The Comedian. Again, without spoiling too much, this story is an incredible depiction of what it would be like if superheroes existed in our society. Watchmen does such an incredible job inserting fictional characters into the history of our country and has such well thought out scenarios and consequences to their impact on society, especially one character in particular. And when it comes to characters, there's actually quite a few, since this story revolves around a group of heroes and anti-heroes. All of these characters are very well written and very creative as far as design and personality. Complex and in-depth, this story is dark and is full of reflection of our society and its history and politics, told in an alternate fictional way. The art is unique, especially when it comes to the character designs. It really sets the tone and is a great window into this fictional classic. If you are a comic book reader or you plan to start reading comics, Watchmen is a must. It also gave us Rorschach, who is by far one of my favorite comic book characters and anti-heroes, period. I first read this book just before the release of the live-action film, and I even finished it the day it hit theaters. Although I did enjoy the film, I do realize it's nearly impossible to cram everything that book had to offer into one movie, and it's really hard to reach the level of depth of these characters in such a short time. And I really could make a video on the movie and my thoughts on that another day, but regardless, Watchmen, the graphic novel, is one of the greatest books of all time. Now that that's been said, we can move on to our next graphic novel on the list, The Killing Joke. Staying with the works of Alan Moore, I now want to mention another one of his classics, The Killing Joke. Published by DC Comics in 1988, the dark psychological story of the relationship between the Joker and Batman, and even shedding some light on a Joker origin story. But this too I already have a video for, so if you haven't seen that, go check out my video where I review The Killing Joke animated film and the graphic novel. Go check that out if you haven't seen it. And because of that, I also won't be going too in-depth into this book either. But I will say I am a pretty big fan of this one. And it's not very long and is actually a pretty quick read. It's an Alan Moore story that focuses on Batman and especially the Joker. So do I even need to tell you it has dark moments? Joker is one of my favorite comic book characters, and to get a good deeper look into his psyche is awesome. Also has some pretty good artwork too. So if you haven't read The Killing Joke, I highly recommend you check that out. And then I highly recommend you check out my video where we review the animated film and the graphic novel. So what's next on the list? Superman Red Sun, written by Mark Millar, with artwork done by Dave Johnson and Killian Plunkett. Red Sun was actually a 3-issued limited series, and to be honest, I found it pretty damn interesting. This one I would love to get more in depth in its own video where I can get into spoilers, but until then I won't spoil anything, but I will give you the premise. It's a what if where instead of Superman crashing into Kansas, USA as a baby when he first arrived on Earth, he lands on a farm in Soviet Russia. Taking place in the early 50s and stretching all the way to the early 2000s, the story focuses on Superman's life on Earth growing up embracing the ways of Stalinism and communism instead of the American way and democracy. That's why I think this is so intriguing. It's such an interesting spin on history and politics. You know how America has always viewed communism, and to see how this way of thinking is embedded in the foundation of who Superman is and how it coincides with the rest of his core values. I haven't read a lot of Superman, but this story really opened me up to his character. And I feel now because of Superman Red Sun, I am much more interested in Superman, period. It's such an interesting take and is the ultimate dive into the core of a character. Like I said earlier, I really want to dedicate a video to this, so look out for that in the future. But until then, that's Superman Red Sun. I'm briefly going to talk about another graphic novel that came out as a limited series, and that's Marvel's Earth X, written by Jim Krueger, art by John Paul Leon, and based on a lot of notes and ideas of Alex Ross. And I say I briefly want to talk about it because when I read this and its sequel Universe X, I was much younger, and to be honest, I don't remember a whole lot about it. Back then, I found them to be pretty interesting, but I was much younger, and I would love to revisit and reread these books. From what I remember, it's basically a dystopian future, where, for reasons, no spoilers, everyone on Earth has obtained superpowers. Just like Syndrome says, when everyone's super, no one is. And that is definitely true to a large degree in this story. For example, without spoiling too much, Peter Parker is not Spider-Man anymore, but a pot-bellied, middle-aged, basically average guy. And when a world-threatening event occurs, from what I remember, a lot of our favorites, now old heroes, must step into the spotlight yet again to save the world. So yeah, that's Earth X. Check it out. I know I need to again. Let's move on. Next is The Dark Knight Returns, possibly one of the most famous graphic novels of all time. The Dark Knight Returns, DC's 1986 graphic novel by Frank Miller, doesn't need me to do it justice. Just go read it for yourself. This is one of the most iconic stories in the comic book world, period. The story takes place many years in the future. Bruce Wayne, who's long retired the identity of Batman, must don his mask again when Gotham gets worse than ever because of the mutant gang who's terrorizing the city and making it shit. We also see the Joker return from an unexplained catatonic state after the news of Batman's return reaches him. The story also introduces a young female Robin and includes the iconic showdown between the Dark Knight and the Man of Steel. Even BVS supposedly and clearly used a lot of classic images and ideas from this book in the movie. It contains some very classic images and is just a great story all around. I had a lot of fun with this, and Frank Miller is such a great writer. I highly recommend it if you haven't read it yet. It's a must for all comic book fans. So that's the classic, The Dark Knight Returns. Now I want to get into one I really enjoyed. Also released as a limited series, but over a much longer period of time. I'm going to include this on my list because it does have an overarching story, and like I said, I really enjoyed it, and it would just be wrong not to put it on my list. Planetary Guide. Written by Warren Ellis and art by John Cassaday. This is a very unique, very creative story with beautiful artwork. I absolutely loved reading this. I don't think I've really ever read anything like it. The book as a whole is huge, over 800 pages. Definitely don't want to spoil anything, but it's about a team, basically archaeologists and or first responders to events or things on Earth that relate to the supernatural, the extraterrestrial, military and scientific experiments, superhumans, or anything like that. They handle various events and record all the information they obtain as Earth's secret history in what is essentially an almanac called the Planetary Guide. I'm not going to tell you any more about this. Just go read it. It's definitely one of my all-time favorites. You should definitely check it out. That's Planetary Guide. Okay, so I'm going to go over my last graphic novel on the list. And currently, at the time of recording this video, I'm actually only about halfway through it. And that's Batman: The Long Halloween. So like I said, I'm only about halfway through this right now. But my thoughts on it so far, I really like it. I'm really intrigued. I really like the artwork. And I'm having a lot of fun reading it right now. I'm surprised I'm still not done. I feel like the images are very unique and very creative. I love the color and what it brings to the story. We basically get a really good detective story out of this, as it takes place over a long period of time, with important days being holidays because there's a new killer out there and he strikes on every major holiday. And Batman is obviously trying to track down and figure out who it is. It revolves around the Falcone family quite a bit. It kind of has that mob feel or film noir type feel, but it also includes a lot of Batman's rogues gallery as well. Like I said, so far I really like it. I can't wait to finish it. I thought I knew who the killer was at one point, but I was proven wrong, and that just shows you how fun this book is. So definitely The Long Halloween, gotta check that out. So there's a list of some of my favorite graphic novels. I've been fortunate enough not to read a lot of awful ones, but over the years, these are the ones that stick out to me. But there are so many out there, and so many I still want to read, classics even, like V for Vendetta, Sandman, Daredevil Man Without Fear, Hush, and many more. I really love graphic novels, just like any good movie or book, TV show, or anime. It takes me to another world, and I just love being lost in it. So, what did you think of the list, and what are some of your favorite graphic novels? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to check out the other videos I've done on the specific graphic novels, and look out for the ones to come in the future. This has been AnTalk, the weekly comic conversation. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching. Take care. See you later.